are going to go to Psalm chapter 27. Psalm chapter 27, and I'm going to read the entirety of this psalm, and I've been looking forward to this. We've referenced it often, and we are listening to our man David today. We're going to talk a little bit about David. Last week was Moses, and today we're going to look at David's heart and what drove him. And I'm going to read it from the NLT here. And I invite you, if you have a Bible, you can go ahead and read along with us or read on the screens. If you're at home, we'll have it up on the screen for you as well, I believe, or just follow along with us. Psalm 27, it's a psalm of David. It says this: "The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I be afraid? The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger, so why should I tremble? When evil people come to devour me, when my enemies and foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. Even if I am attacked, I will remain confident. The one thing I ask of the Lord, the thing I seek most, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple. For he will conceal me there when troubles come. He will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock. Then I will hold my head high above my enemies who surround me. At his sanctuary I will offer sacrifices with shouts of joy, singing and praising the Lord with music. Hear me as I pray, O Lord. Be merciful and answer me. My heart has heard you say, 'Come and talk with me.' And my heart responds, 'Lord, I am coming.' Do not turn your back on me. Do not reject your servant in anger. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me, O God of my salvation. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. Teach me how to live, O Lord. Lead me along the right path, for my enemies are waiting for me. Do not let me fall into their hands, for they accuse me of things I've never done. With every breath, they threaten me with violence. Yet I am confident I will see the Lord's goodness while I am here in the land of the living. Wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord." Amen. God, we thank you for your word. Thank you for your word. It speaks to us. It reveals to us who you are, what your heart looks like. God, I pray today that it would be you speaking and revealing yourself to this family. I pray that we would have a revelation of you, of your goodness, of your holiness, of your character, of your perfection. God, let us see you more clearly today, I pray. And change us. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. David writes in the psalm of his one thing, and his desire was to live in God's house, to be where God was, with God where he was. And David longed for time at his feet, contemplating his beauty, some translations say. He wanted to be with God, to behold God, as we talked about last week, and to be changed by that experience. He talks about meditating on, learning. He wanted to be transformed by God's presence. We hear in this psalm his heart, his desire, his one thing, he says, is to be with God and to stare at him, to behold him, to contemplate him, to learn from him. That's what he's all about. And this is a familiar passage of scripture. If you've been in church for any length of time, you've heard of it. You've heard this reference before. And I have been meditating on it for a while. There's so much in there that's so rich that helps me more clearly see God through David's words, through David's heart. I've been thinking about what my one thing is. What does that look like for me? What is the one thing that if you were to strip away everything else, this is what I would cling to? I hope it stirs those thoughts in you as well. Like, what is the most important thing in your life? It's a good exercise to consider, and it is very revealing. We just sang those words. There is nothing better than you, God. There's nothing better than you. We sing them, and yet it's a work to live that out, to actually let that be the truth for us, that we would be able to be a bunch of people who say, there is nothing better than God. There's nothing better than time in his presence. I just want more of him. And if you know me or if you listen to me, you'll know that I'm very precious about early mornings with God. I love to get up early, sometimes not by choice, but it's okay. Whenever I get out of that bed, there is something so beautiful, so precious to me about getting to the couch. And you already know I have to stop for coffee, and I hang out on the couch and I spend time with God. But even reading this, I want to be really transparent that I've been considering, is it the fact that I just want to be with him, to sit with him, to gaze at him, to behold him, as we've been talking about in this series, Holy Wow? Is it God that is the object of my longing, of my affection? Is it God that gets me out of bed in the morning just to be with him? And it is. And yet the more I look at him, and this will be familiar to all of you Jesus people, the more I look at him, the more I see that there's things in my life or things in the way that need to be dealt with, that need to get out of the way so that I can behold him more clearly, so that I love him more, so that he has more and more of my affection. As a pastor, but you guys will relate with this too, there's times when I want to be with God because I need a word from God. I need some wisdom maybe on something going on in my life. Or there's somebody who's navigating something that's like way over my pay grade. And so I need God to come through with like something that I can pass along to them. And we do that because God is so good and he's so wise and he does give us wisdom and he does reveal things to us. And sometimes I wonder if I can go to him because I need something from him more than being motivated by just being with him. I don't know if this resonates with you guys at all, but that can inspire us or drive us sometimes. And when we listen to David, we hear this like longing to just be with God in his temple, gazing at him. I wonder if sometimes we're just kind of content to be with God because of the incredible gifts he gives us, because of the wisdom he gives us, because of the insight, because of the downloads that we get from him, by studying his word, by discovering more of who he is. Even like when we get together in a setting like this, sometimes I wonder if we're just kind of content to get together because God is the thing, but we like staring at each other. Maybe the more introverted, extroverted you are, that helps on the scale. Some of you just really like getting together so you can chat it up with the church family. And that's beautiful. That's amazing. That's incredible. That is one of the gifts that comes out of the community, being part of a family, is that there is togetherness and we are called to encourage one another. But I wonder, and I'm just like bringing all this up because I want to fix our attention on God himself today, if sometimes just the ability to be in a room with a bunch of great people who love Jesus too, and they're talking about how good he is and what he's doing in their lives, if that is enough to kind of satisfy the itch, the longing, the craving that we actually have, that's meant to be directed toward God. We can be this way. And this is a really poor example, but imagine if we are doing like a social gathering. So forgive me, Brandon, but I'm just gonna Brandon is a newish friend of mine. And I don't know you particularly well, Brandon, but you're marrying somebody I really like. So automatically you have great tastes and we just like you. You're in. I trust that he's a really great guy. But imagine if Brandon was like the guy, like I'd heard about how amazing he is. And we don't have to imagine too hard because you are, apparently. This is totally true. And everybody wants to be around Brandon. Like he's the guy. He's generous. He's super smart. He has all the answers. And so we want to be with him. And imagine if Brandon was to just throw like a big party. and everybody gets to come who he chooses to invite. And it's all about Brandon. Maybe it's your birthday. I don't know when your birthday is, but let's pretend it's today, okay? April the 3rd. Happy birthday. And it's his birthday. He's obviously like the guest of honor. He's invited all these people to get together to celebrate. And his heart is so generous. So he just wants people to come together. He wants people to feel seen and known and loved. He has gifts for everybody. And it's just like the most incredible gathering. And imagine if we were all to get together. We come to Brandon's party. But we're just so excited to see everybody else who's there. And we start like just chatting it up with everyone. And we forget that Brandon is the reason we were there. And I don't know if you've been to a party like this, but it happens sometimes where you are the host, you're the one who's put out everything, and Brandon kind of gets sidelined. We're excited about everything else that's going on. Or that's like a public example, and this obviously isn't like a perfect comparison, but just use our imagination here. What if, because Brandon had so much experience and knowledge, and he had all the right answers, so that every time he invited me to go for a coffee, and we'd invite you too, Isa, obviously, of course, I want to be with him because I need him to help me out, like with my life. He's super helpful to me. He's a great resource to me. So I want to be with him, but not necessarily because I just want to be with him. It's because he's so helpful to me. Well, Brandon, as a generous, really good person, would probably just be delighted to help. But you can't help but feel for the guy. If he wants to be together, if his desire is to build a friendship, if he wants to have people to come and celebrate and be with him, and we're happy to kind of be in his orbit, but it's not so much about him, about our relationship with him, about celebrating his birthday, happy birthday, and about how good he is. You see how, like, with that example, and that's just like a silly human example, it makes us feel uncomfortable, it's so wrong. When it comes to the things of God, we can get distracted just in our humanity so easily. And we can love the idea of being with God and love how God provides for us and what he gives to us. He is our comforter. He is our provider. He's amazing. He's God. He has everything that we need. But we can get distracted by and lose the plot when we don't have our attention and our affection and our hope and our excitement focused on God himself, which is what he's longing for. That is God's heart. And here in Psalm 27, we're listening to David. And we hear David say that there's just one thing he wants, and that is to be in God's house all of his days. Just God forever. Beholding him, learning from him, sitting at his feet. And I feel challenged by that, as I've just shared. And I believe that we're all supposed to feel a little bit challenged and convicted by that in the best way. Yeah. David was a king, right? But he lived as a priestly man. He was a king. He had a position of power and authority. He was chosen by God. He was put where he was for a reason. And he lives this life as a king, but also he lives in a priestly way. And priest in Latin is pontifex, right? It's this term that describes bridging something. It's actually in Latin an engineering term that speaks of being a bridge, making a bridge between a chasm. So a priest stands in a place of building a bridge or being a bridge between God and humanity. And in order to be a good priest, you have to understand both sides well. You need to know God well, and you also need to know how to relate the God that you know to the people. Jesus, of course, is our ultimate high priest. He is the ultimate pontifex. He's the one who knows what it is to be human. He relates to us and our weaknesses, and yet he is fully God. He couldn't understand or know God better because he is God. David is a unique character. He's a unique person who is called a man after God's own heart. When God looked at David, he looked at his heart, and he saw a heart that was toward him. When I look at David, I love him. I love his words. I love how he expresses himself, how he shows us a unique perspective of God. But when I think about who he was and how he lived, and the fact that he was called a man after God's own heart, it's honestly scandalous, and it bugs me, to be transparent. We are talking a lot or listening to stories often these days about scandal. Scandal in the church in particular. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but when there's scandal, when there's things that are off, that are wrong, that are not the way that they should be in the church, we believe that they should be revealed. And honestly, I kind of have a bit of an attitude in that I would just say, like, let it burn. If it is not of God, let it burn, let it go. Let's let God burn away everything that doesn't glorify him. David was a man, like I said, with this power. And he used it to manipulate. He used it to control, to mess with people. He used the power that he had to sleep with Bathsheba. He saw her, and I don't know if you've heard that story in your youth, perhaps like I have, and you thought that she was the one who was out there doing the thing, trying to get his attention, like the blame was on her. But let's look at who he was. The most powerful man in the land, who when he saw her and when he wanted her, she couldn't say no. And he took her. And not only did he use his power to get what he wanted from this woman sexually, but then he also used it to kill her husband. It's gross. Talk about a scandal. It's evil. It's awful. But he is called a man after God's own heart. This messes with me. It's messing with me today. It's not something I've figured out that I'm just going to present to you. This is what it looks like. But this is what I know, is that when you look at David and you see his life and you see how he expresses himself, you have to see that he was a man who was captivated by God, that God had his heart. He was fully in awe of God. When David looks at God and we hear it through his words, how he acted, we see that he looked at God and he was transfixed. He completely was moved by his fascination with, his awe of who God was. David wasn't necessarily a good guy. We wouldn't call him a good guy. He did so many good things, no question. You all are looking at me like, why are you talking about David this way? Go ahead and read their stuff. Even when he was doing his best, motivated by his love for God, to put God in the center of the people, he didn't do everything right. He moved the ark when he shouldn't have. Somebody died because of that. He danced in his underwear. Like, we look at that and we're like, yes, we should be more like God. More like David, but really? Should we? Is that what we should do next Sunday? Maybe, I don't know. He was very enthusiastic in his appreciation for God, but you can see his heart, that when he saw God, he was captivated by him. His heart was captured by him. And David had this deep ache on the inside of him. His ache was, and you hear it expressed here in Psalm 27, that God would have a place among his people. We looked at Moses and how God's desire was to be with his people, but they sent Moses. You go do the thing. You go up the hill. You meet with God. It's too much for us. And here David, years later, he has this desire for God to be with his people. And it motivated him to want to build this temple, a place where God could be, where God could rest. And David was so captivated by God and this dream of God being amongst his people that he could not rest while God was still restless. It messed with him in such a way that he was determined to build this place for God to come and be amongst his people. We hear this desire, this ache, this longing that David had in Psalm 132. Here the psalmist is writing. We're not sure who the psalmist is. It could very well be Solomon, David's son. And he writes of David. He says to God, Lord, remember David and all that he suffered. He made a solemn promise to the Lord. He vowed to the mighty one of Israel. David said, I will not go home. I will not let myself rest. I will not let my eyes sleep, nor close my eyelids in slumber until I find a place to build a house for the Lord, a sanctuary for the mighty one of Israel. David could not chill while God was still restless, while God did not yet have a place to be amongst his people, to be there in the center. And that was his one thing, as we just read in Psalm 27, verse 4. One thing, David said, that he wanted was to live in the house of the Lord all the days of his life, delighting in his perfections and meditating in his temple. He was preoccupied with God. You could say he was obsessed with his presence. David wanted to know him. He wanted to delight in him, to discover more of him, to enjoy him. He wanted to learn more of who God was, meditating in his temple. He wanted to know God's thoughts, and that had his whole heart. Verse 5 says, he will conceal me there when troubles come. He will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock. David knew the safety of God's presence. He lived for that. That's where he ran. Verse 7 says, hear me as I pray. Be merciful and answer me. My heart has heard you say, come and talk with me. And my heart responds, Lord, I am coming. I can't read that without thinking of Mary sitting at Jesus' feet and just the contrast of Mary and Martha. Martha knew there were things to be done. She was a doer. I identify with this so much. And she was busy doing the Lord's work while her sister was content just sitting at Jesus' feet. And Jesus says to Martha, the one who's busy, Martha, you're worried and upset over all the details, but there is only one thing worth being concerned about, Jesus says. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken from her. Mary had this revelation of all that mattered was being with Jesus, looking at him, staring at him, discovering more of him, learning from him. And the promise is this, that David didn't die having completed that desire that he lived with. He died with that promise, that hope, that dream still unfulfilled. He was still longing for it here on earth. Jesus came, the Word made flesh. Jesus, Emmanuel, God who moved into the neighborhood. Jesus, God who came to be with us. And he walked with us, and he learned our ways, and he suffered, and he died. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to celebrate Resurrection Sunday. I'm wearing my Easter sweater today. That's what Cal said. I'm an Easter egg today. He didn't call me an Easter egg. I'm calling myself an Easter egg. We're going to celebrate Resurrection Sunday, which is the victory that is ours, that Jesus has already come and done the thing. The price has been paid. Shame doesn't have to separate us from God any longer. So that Jesus came, and he came to be with us. And we have this hope. He is our living hope, that today we know that Jesus is on the throne. The Lamb is on the throne. That there is a crowd surrounding him singing of his holiness. Holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. And we join with that choir today as we were singing. And we look forward to the day. Revelation tells us that the day is coming, 21 verse 3, which we have this revelation, this thing to look forward to, where it says that I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, God's home is now among his people. This will happen. That was my addition. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. And this is what we look forward to. This is what we are experiencing today, we believe the birth pangs, the trembling, the changes across this earth that are leading to the day where God himself will be right here amongst his people, where we can worship and be with him. And that sanctuary that is coming is unlike anything that David would have dreamt of, although that was like a prophetic pointing towards what will come. It will be greater and grander and beyond what we would dream of. But that is the hope. That just as David had this ache on the inside of him for God to come and to be with them, that will be the reality. We look forward to that. And we sing about it and we talk about it because that is the hope that we cling to. He reigns right now. He reigns today. And we will experience the fullness of his reign in the time to come. Holy wow. The thing is this, David's ache didn't die with him. It is an ache. It's a longing that we as the church are privileged and called to carry. And we feel it. Don't you feel it? The longing for things to be right. The longing to be with him. When there will be no more tears, no more grief. When we can look at him face to face and not fall over dead. When we will be with him, we're called to live with that ache. And it is a good hurt. It's the kind of hurt or longing you carry when you're deeply in love with somebody and perhaps separated from them or unable to experience the fullness of their presence. It is the longing that he has put on the inside of us that causes us to want more than what we experience in this life. You don't feel that way just because God designed us, as we talked about last week, to be with him as Adam and Eve were in the garden, to be present with him, to experience him. But he is the whole goal. It's about being with him. It's not. Heaven is wonderful. We have so many reasons to look forward to it. It's about him. It's about God. It's about his presence. It's about knowing him more. If we don't love Jesus, if we don't love him, we probably aren't going to love heaven because it's all about him. And so this earth life is about repositioning, changing, orienting ourselves toward him, God himself. Pointing our affection and our attention and our longings and our cravings and the ache on the inside that drives us toward him. And as I talk about that longing for him, I'm very aware that you might feel like, oh, I wish I felt that. I get the ache thing, but I wish he was the object of my affection. That maybe you feel that so strongly, and I pray that you do. And maybe it feels like there's other things, perhaps, that kind of satisfy in the meanwhile. And that is the work that he does in and through us. He is sanctifying us. He is changing us. It requires us fixing our eyes upon Jesus. It requires us looking at him through his word. Not because reading your Bible is the thing that is like, check that off, now I'm closer to him, but because it reveals to us more of who he is. And that is what we're created to do. We're created to together behold him and to reflect him as in a mirror, to be changed and transformed, to look and to become more like he is. Because the day is coming when we will be with him. And our desire would be that we would be changed into a companion that is suitable for Jesus. That we would be that pure and perfect and holy bride. That we would be together with him. We together as the church today, what we get to do, what we're called to do, is live as a prophetic glimpse of what is yet to come. So when we talk about our vision is that it would be here as it is in heaven. Those obviously are not our words. That was Jesus' prayer. But our hope, our longing, our craving would be that when we're together at a time like this, or when we're together in our communities in small groups, or when you go to your job this week and you take that presence of God along with you, that wherever you are, heaven is there because you are a container for his presence, because we get to carry God himself with us. How wild is that? And that is God's heart. It's his heart that we would want to be with him. And not just us, but that as we are with him, that we are transformed so that then others get to get a glimpse of what heaven looks like. We as the church are a present demonstration of a future reality. That's wild to me. It's wild. And it's true. And you and I know, and God knows, that in our weakness, in our trying, in our failures, in our just kind of showing up the best that we know how to, we are not able to make one thing happen of eternal significance outside of God doing what God does. But when we are changed by his closeness, by his presence, by his power, by his word, when we are transformed, when we allow him, as David did, when we put our eyes on him, when he has our attention, when we're captivated by him, then everything changes. We see everything differently through the lens of his holiness, of his glory, of how his kingdom is breaking through in our lives. David said these words in Psalm 27, and I want to close with this. He says, "My heart has heard you say." My heart has heard you say, he says, "Come and speak with me." And David's response is, "Lord, I am coming." And that might be more flowery language than you use or relate to. Maybe you don't say things that way. I might, but maybe you don't. My heart has heard you say. Come and speak with me, he says. Come and hang out with me. Come and be with me. But however you would hear that or translate it or communicate it, I'm confident that in a room of this size, and I know we have many who are joining us online, that you're familiar with that calling, the speaking to your heart, that desire for something bigger than what is satisfying your need right now. That if you were to just get quiet for a moment and listen to the stirring, the longings of your heart, that the inside of you, that you too, as I do, that you hear God calling you, drawing you. You can hear him saying, "Come closer, come and be with me." He's jealous for your attention, for your affection. And he draws us, that's the work of his Spirit. He draws us toward himself. If you hear him calling you today, whatever that looks like, however he sounds, it's usually a very still, small voice. My prayer is, and for real, I've been praying this for a while, that as you hear that, your response would be, "Lord, I'm coming." Because whenever we hear that invitation from God, we have the ability to either respond and come closer, or so often, because of maybe shame that we feel, we would rather not let the light of God into those dark places. Maybe because we feel satisfied, life is okay, actually. I don't know if I need anything else. It's working out pretty good. If that is you, God bless you. I don't think that's a whole lot of us. But for whatever reason, we also have the ability to resist, to push back. Maybe to say, I'm gonna wait on that. I'm not sure. I'm okay. I'll figure it out on my own. My prayer is that today, and I love, Mom, that you talked about the urgency. The days are short. There's no fear in that. There's an invitation. My prayer is that as you hear him calling you, you would say, Lord, I'm coming. Speak to me. I want to see you. I want to seek your face. I want to behold you. Not interested in anything other than you. There's nothing better